Marco's laugh echoed in my mind. You wouldn't last a day without me, Elena. That's when I decided our cozy suburban home would make a lovely just-sold postcard to mail to his office. My name is Elena Vasquez, and life had a way of testing me. 5 years ago, I married Marco, a charming coworker with a sharp wit and an alluring smile. Fallen by a mutual passion for success, we became a power couple at the office, only to face our vulnerability at home. The dream of nurturing a family together began to crumble with each failed pregnancy test. The hallways of fertility clinics became painfully familiar as we exhausted options, drained emotions, and dwindled savings. By the time I felt the first flutters of life within me, I had weathered a storm of hormone injections and hope. It wasn't just one heartbeat echoing during the ultrasound. It was two. We named our miracles Gabriel and Sophia. Marco's initial elation at the news of twins soon faded into a distant interest. His involvement was sporadic at best, absent at most. Nights blurred with feedings and diaper changes, often solo endeavors as Marco distanced himself, citing workplace exhaustion. My love for the twins was unbounded, but in the dark circles under my eyes and the ache in my bones, I knew this wasn't the partnership I'd signed up for. Gabriel and Sophia arrived early, fighters from the start. While they lay in the NICU, I laid plans for their future. But Marco, he was like an anchor, dragging my determination through the murky waters of doubt. I pledged to myself that our children would never feel the burden of their father's inattention, a vow heavy with consequence and courage. The first year of their life tested everything I knew about strength. As my body labored to recover, my resolve strained under the weight of Marco's apathy. Support. He called his occasional peeks into their nursery, peppering his absence with excuses and unfulfilled promises. The inequality of our roles grew, a chasm I could no longer bridge with love alone. Yet, the thought of leaving never gained momentum for long. My father had grown sick, the kind of illness that drains life in slow sips. With my mother having passed years before, he had nobody else. And as for me, with no job and savings devoured by IVF, I was tethered to Marco's erratic benevolence like a boat adrift, dependent on his mercies and whims. That day when the vase shattered against the floor, the water drenching my skin, I understood the capacity of our bond's fracture. But I had made a choice to ensure it would not break me. I mopped the floors, silenced the warning of desperation in my heart, and planned. Because all it takes is a moment for fate to align with fortitude, and that moment had come. I just had to reach out and grasp it tightly. The morning sun slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows across what was once a nursery, now a war zone of scattered toys and overturned furniture. Sophia's wails cut through the silence, a shrill reminder that today, like every other day, I would face alone. Gabriel, ever the explorer, had managed to find the one remaining family heirloom, a silver picture frame my grandmother had given me, and was using it as a chew toy. I wrestled it away, my heart sinking. The last piece of my past, the last bit of value I owned other than the roof over our heads, would soon have to be sold. The weight of that decision pulled at my chest, a physical ache that seemed to spread with each labored breath. As much as that frame was a symbol of my heritage, it was now a lifeline, a ticket to keep the lights on and the cupboards from growing bare. Marco, on the other hand, remained blissfully oblivious to the depth of our financial troubles. He had a knack for evading responsibility, an art form he had perfected over the years. I returned to the workforce not by choice but necessity, dropping the twins off at a daycare that drained an already sparse bank account. My absence from the office had made me a stranger in the world I used to dominate, my confidence replaced with apologies and hasty exits whenever the daycare would call about another fever or cough. My supervisors were understanding, yet their patience had limits I dared not test. Each sick day, each rush home felt like a twisted countdown to my professional demise. On one occasion, I mustered the courage to ask Marco for help, yet his excuses danced around any reasonable offer. "I can't. I have a meeting," he would say, or, "They're just kids. They get sick." The burden of solo parenting lay heavy on my shoulders, a mantle I wore out of love for my children, but it was wearing me thin. Resignation from my job was not a choice but a conclusion, the result of countless pressures culminating in a silent scream for reprieve. I confided in my father, whose frailty belied a fierce will. Elena, my girl, you've borne more than anyone should, he whispered, drawing me close. His hands, once strong, now trembled against my back. Let me take some of this weight. But how could I? His health teetered on a precarious edge, his life a finicky balance of medication and rest. Adding my burdens to his would be unforgivable. Yet, he insisted, adamant in his resolve. Family lifts each other up, he said, his voice a feather yet heavy with conviction. We'll find our way through this, just you wait. My father's assurance was a balm, but it couldn't replace a paycheck. The guilt was a routine visitor, making itself at home within me as I saw the worry etch deeper into his face with every passing day. I was trapped, not by love or duty, but by necessity, a slave to the circumstances I couldn't escape. The silver frame sold to a faceless buyer for a soul-crushing sum, all too soon spent on necessities. As I slid the money over the counter for a week's worth of groceries, the reality of my situation seemed to sharpen into painful focus. I was at the end of my rope, the ends frayed and unwinding. It was time for the charade to end. It was time to fight back. Uneasy light filtered through the blinds, casting a dull glow over the toys strewn across the floor. The walls of our home, a place that once harbored the whispers of shared dreams, now stood silent, guarding the secret of my crumbling marriage. As Marco's shadow loomed large and menacing within our lives, my space for hope dwindled. His ire had no bounds, no line it wouldn't cross. His voice, once soft and filled with affection, now clenched with contempt. He was a tempest, his anger the crashing waves, and I, a ship made of glass, threatened to shatter with the smallest misstep. The day he hurled his cell phone across the room, narrowly missing Gabriel, who giggled, oblivious to the danger, was the day my tolerance reached its nadir. But there was a spark, faint and flickering, in the gloom. A ray of light began to slip through the shadows. My father. With his health improving and Grandma finally settled into a nursing facility, he was determined to shoulder part of my burden. His arrival marked the first breath of fresh air in a home that had grown stifling. Lean on me, Elena, he urged, taking the twins in his arms with surprising dexterity for his age. I'm not made of glass. Let me help you rebuild. And so, with the twins in safer hands, I set off to reclaim the life I had on hold. I reached out to Isabel, my former boss and mentor, who had risen through the ranks with a grace I had always admired. The call was the first step in executing the plan that had brewed in the recesses of my mind, our small act of defiance against Marco's tyranny. Isabel, it's Elena. I'm thinking of returning to work, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Isabel's response was prompt, sympathetic to the point of painful. I suspected as much, she confided, a hint of something more in her tone. There's been something you should know about Marco. Can you come in tomorrow? The next day, the old familiarity of the office wrapped around me like a well-worn glove as I sat across from Isabel. Despite our formal attire and the polished wood of the desk between us, the atmosphere was intimate, protectively confidential. He's been unfaithful, Elena, Isabel divulged, cutting straight to the heart of a truth I had already sensed. With a client's daughter. It's more than gossip. There are receipts, and, well, people have seen them together. The realization stung, a sickening confirmation of the distance between us, yet it was ammunition for what was to come. It propelled me forward, a catalyst for my resolve. I laid bare my intentions for divorce, my need for independence, and Isabel responded not just with support, but with action. She fast-tracked my return to the company, championing my cause with the vigor of a true ally. With every piece that fell into place, I saw the path before me clear, and with a surge of newfound courage I was ready to make move. The evening I set my plan in motion. The house felt larger, the silence louder. Outside, the sunset bled across the sky, a canvas of defiance. Inside, my father whispered stories to the twins as I packed their bags, preparing for the upheaval to come. Marco's business trip was a timely blessing, and with the ink still wet on my letter of resignation, I knew there would be no turning back this time. Every item packed away, every photograph removed from the walls, was a declaration. I was off to change the locks, hand over the house keys to the realtor, and finally step out of the prison Marco had unwittingly built around us. The following morning I left our now bare house, the echo of emptiness reverberating with each step I took. Walking into the office, my nerves buzzed undeniably. A mix of anxiety and adrenaline surged through me. The familiar sights and sounds of the workplace greeted me like old friends long missed. Isabel welcomed me with a warm, conspiratorial smile that did little to quell the flurry of butterflies in my stomach. "You're doing the right thing," Isabel reassured, her gaze steady, her words a solid anchor. "You're taking back control." Her office, once a place where I got career advice, now served as the backdrop to the unfolding drama of my personal life. Isabel closed the door with a decisive click and, without preamble, unveiled Marco's betrayal in somber detail. He had taken far more than his share of liberties. His affair with the daughter of one of our clients, not just an insult but a liability. It wasn't just our company's reputation at stake, but his professional future. Images of them together lurched at me from the fringes of my mind, yet the revelation steeled me. I wouldn't let his indiscretions be my undoing. "Thank you," I murmured, the weight of the situation settling around me like a cloak. "He won't get away with this." Isabel proceeded to lay out the groundwork for my return to work. As it turned out, they needed someone with my expertise and experience. "It's your second act, Elena," she said, her voice a blend of excitement and firm resolution. But the opportunities didn't end there. After discussing possible starts and positions, Isabel revealed another game-changing detail: a newly implemented on-site daycare, a solution to one of the many complicated puzzles of my life. There was a light at the end of the tunnel, and it was finally bright enough to chase away the shadows that had settled in my heart. Armed with this fresh knowledge and a plan that grew bolder by the minute, I left Isabel's office poised for the impending confrontation. The empty house wasn't just a sign of a life shed. It was the first stone in the foundation of a new one. My father, God bless his resolute heart, backed me every step of the way. It was our secret, a quiet rebellion danced out in the signing of papers and whispers of change. The real estate agent, understanding the delicacy of the situation, had agreed to act quickly. As I met with the realtor, who was keen to capitalize on the property's prime location, I signed off on what was undeniably my most assertive act yet. The house was more mine than Marco's, purchased with my pre-marriage savings and therefore mine to sell. I reflected, not without a twinge of irony, how little Marco had cared for the old place, dismissing it as a temporary inconvenience while we climbed the corporate ladder. Yet now it would become the very instrument of my liberation. The plan was set into motion with a precision that would have impressed even my toughest critics at work. With the realtor's help, we moved swiftly, securing a buyer and moving my family into a comfortable rental. My father, with renewed vigor, was already making the space our own, filling it with laughter and plans for the future. As I lay in bed that evening, staring at the ceiling in the quiet before sleep, the enormity of what I'd done began to sink in. I'd taken back my life, my children's future, and secured our escape. There was no turning back now. The glass doors of the office building seemed heavier than I remembered, but today they parted with the promise of new beginnings. A chorus of unfamiliar yet friendly faces welcomed me, the employees I would soon work alongside. With each step, I anchored myself in the reality of my fresh start. The cloak of anonymity I'd worn during my time away had been shed. I was Elena Vasquez, soon to be Elena Vasquez, single mother and respected professional. Marco, however, remained a storm cloud on the horizon of my newfound clarity. It wasn't long before I heard the familiar cadence of his voice echoing down the hallway as he approached. There was a frantic edge to it, a discordant note that betrayed his composure. His eyes found mine, widening with a mixture of shock and anger. "Where have you been? Where are the kids?" he demanded, his voice sharp, betraying his usual facade of control. Resisting the impulse to back away, I stood my ground. "They're safe," I replied evenly. "They're with my father." Marco's gaze darted around, taking in the faces of our colleagues who had formed an ad hoc audience to the unfolding drama. Isabel stepped forward, her presence a shield between the past and my future. "Welcome back, Elena," she declared with a smile, cutting through the tension. "We've all been looking forward to this day." The assembled coworkers erupted into applause, isolating Marco with their camaraderie. He seemed to shrink, a figure diminishing in the light of collective support. Confused yet defiant, he spluttered, "What is this about? Why didn't you tell me you were coming back?" "Isabel, with the poise of someone used to handling delicate situations, responded, "Our company is a family, Marco, and when a member of our family is ready to return, we celebrate." A murmur of agreement hummed through the crowd. I watched as understanding dawned upon Marco's face, the implications of my return, the shattering of the narrative he had constructed for himself. "The daycare," he finally stammered. "The children, they must be." I cut him off, my voice steady, my resolve unwavering. "The children are well taken care of. And as for the daycare, we've been fortunate enough to secure spots for both Gabriel and Sophia." Isabel supplemented my words, addressing Marco. "Indeed, they'll be just fine here. We've made certain of that with our new facility." The room buzzed with whispers of commendation and encouragement as Marco realized the breadth of his miscalculation. He had assumed I'd crumble without him, that I'd be forced to compromise. But as the walls he built around me fell away, his own began to close in. "Let's discuss this privately," Marco hissed, reaching for my arm. Resisting his touch, I produced the single item that symbolized the end of our union, a business card from a divorce attorney. His eyes flickered with defeat as I announced, "Please divorce me, Marco." Gasps and whispers filled the room, and I watched as the mask of charm Marco had always worn dissolved into a frown of disbelief. He was silent, searching for words that wouldn't come. Each heartbeat in the silence felt like an eternity, but ultimately it was Isabel's voice that filled the void. "Marco, I think it's time you and the higher-ups had a conversation." Humiliation flared across Marco's face as he backed away, realizing his private indiscretions were far less private than he had believed. As the weight of his deeds crept upon him, he slumped his shoulders, defeated and exposed. I turned away, leaving the broken vase of our marriage behind, and with it the shards of our tarnished past. The flicker of twilight's last stand gave way to night's embrace, as I sat in the quiet comfort of our new rental home, the twins sound asleep in their freshly assembled beds. It was incredible how silence had once been my enemy, filled with the tension of waiting for Marco's critique or outburst. Yet here it was now, a peaceful testament to the change I had courageously enacted. My phone's insistent ringtone splintered the calm. Marco's name flashed on the screen, a vestige of the life I was steadily discarding. With a calming breath, I answered, bracing for the storm I knew I had stirred. "Elena, what have you done?" Marco's voice, barely intelligible between sobs and fury, crackled through the speaker. "I've started over, Marco, for myself and for our children," I replied, my voice a beacon in the tumult. He was in disbelief, reeling from the discovery of my actions, the sale of the house, the relocation of our family. The life he had taken for granted, dismantled, sold off to the highest bidder. My heart might have winced at his confusion once, but that empathy had dissolved with every disparaging remark, every angry shout, every tear shed in solitude because of him. "Our house, our home, it's empty. Where are Gabriel and Sophia and all our things?" He was frantic, grasping at the fragments of control that slipped through his fingers like fine sand. Calmness steadied my response. "It's all taken care of, Marco. The children are with my father, and our possessions are here with us in our new place." "You sold our house without my consent? Without even telling me?" His incredulity suggested betrayal, the irony stinging like salt in a wound. "I did what was necessary, Marco. The house was mine before we married. I used my savings for the down payment, remember?" I spoke the truth he could not refute, the reality he had ignored in favor of his self-centered narrative. "The real estate agent worked with us to find a buyer. It's done. We are moving on." He struggled for words, lost in the labyrinth of his making. When they finally came, they were edged with despair. "I thought we were going to discuss this, figure things out. There's nothing left to figure out. It's over, Marco." My finger hovered over the end call button, ready to sever the last of our ties. But where will I go?" he pleaded, the mighty Marco reduced to echoes of vulnerability. "That's for you to decide. Just know that Gabriel and Sophia will always be cared for, with or without you." The finality of my words seemed to drape over us, a curtain closing on the theater of our farce. I wasted no time after the call, swiftly blocking Marco's number, a line I never thought I'd cross. In the days that followed, legal motions unraveled the entanglements of our failed marriage. Custody, assets, child support. An avalanche of documents and signatures wiped clean the slate, giving rise to my long-awaited freedom. Rumors of his affair saw Marco ousted from his lofty perch, and without the shield of our company's prestige, he eventually resigned. Last I heard, his pride had surrendered to necessity, placing him in a humbler line of work. The whispers of his downfall weaved through the industry like a cautionary tale, a high price paid for hubris and betrayal. Before me lied the blank pages of our lives, ready to be filled with the tales of our choosing. A chapter closed, a book ended, and the narrative was mine to write anew. The morning sun painted hues of gold and amber across the sky, casting a warm glow over the breakfast table where Gabriel and Sophia munched on their cereal with eagerness which only children possess. The atmosphere was serene, a stark contrast to the vortex of recent events. As we sat around the table, my father, the twins, and I formed a new picture, a frame of family redefined by solidarity and love. Those early days of our new life felt like living in a dream, one where I half expected to wake to the sound of Marco's voice demanding an explanation, but that never happened. The twins adapted with the resilience of youth, and over time, peace became our new normal. The transition back into work was smooth, even liberating. Colleagues who had once pitied me now greeted me with respect. My input was once again valued, my insights sought after, and my presence acknowledged. Isabel had checked in often, ensuring that the integration was seamless and that I settled into the rhythm easily. The on-site daycare was a godsend, offering not just convenience but a level of care and attention that left me reassured during the workday. As the days eased into weeks and the weeks meshed into months, we settled into a comfortable routine. Life without Marco's overbearing presence transformed from an initial breath-holding suspense into a deep, gratifying exhale. The fear of his volatility and the anxiety over our future had dissolved into a renewed sense of purpose and independence. Catherine had been true to her word. The whole office seemed to rally around me. Some came by just to tell me how they admired my strength. Others gently shared their own stories of overcoming difficulties. The solidarity was unexpected but deeply appreciated. Even the higher-ups, who were initially guarded, offered their unofficial nods of approval and encouragement. Of course, there were challenges. The twins, with their boundless energy and ceaseless curiosity, ensured there was never a dull moment. The balance between work, motherhood, and personal growth was a delicate dance, but one I was determined to master. Every step I took with a clarity I had not felt in years. I took my father's advice to remain involved with the community to heart. Being active in local events, meeting neighbors, and contributing to the twins' daycare activities provided a sense of belonging. In the shared experiences of parenting and bits of leisurely chats by the playground, I found companionship and a thread of connection weaving into the fabric of our new lives. Gabriel and Sophia burgeoned in this new environment, their laughter a confirmation that leaving Marco had been the right decision. When they hugged me tightly with tiny arms that promised eternity, I knew we had a bright future ahead. All things considered, the upheaval had led to a life more vibrant and fulfilling than I dared to imagine when trapped beneath Marco's shadow. My parents had instilled in me the values of strength, optimism, and resilience, qualities I aimed to pass on to my children. Looking ahead, I saw more than just a flickering light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. I saw brilliant sunshine painting our path forward. As I turned the key in the door of our new home, it was more than just an entranceway. It was a gateway to the promise of tomorrow. And with one last glance back at the road traveled and the traces of the struggle behind us, I stepped through with my head held high, ready for whatever awaited us on the other side.